We will go into the articles and reforms that protect and intend to drive Mexico into a new era of energy production and transformation through renewable resources. In 2008, former President Felipe Calderón Hinojosa and the Congress passed a law for the full exploitation of renewable energy resources and the financing of the energetic transition. This law, in its second article, states the following. The exploitation of the renewable energy sources and clean technology use is of public utility and will be done in the National Strategy for the Energy Transition, through which the Mexican state will promote the efficiency and sustainability of energy, as well as the reduction and the dependence of hydrocarbons as primary source of energy. This law has 31 articles and a couple of transition articles at the end, but what it basically states is what is written above. The law is promoting and taking into account the transition from non-renewable to renewable resources in Mexico. There are different laws that date from a long way before 1975, in which the primary goal was the energy production of non-renewable resources. With the changing and globalized world, the laws had to change, and that is why the new presidents and Congress are making these decisions to transition from one way of seeing energy based on only costs to another way based on environment, costs, and society. This is how Mexico is preparing to become a first world country. The way the President and the Congress aboard this situation is of total benefit for the Mexican people, economy, and its environment. They all promote and support the transition of energy, both the President and the Congress of the Union. Energy reform will enable the industry to compete or seek alternative sources of electricity supply, which is nearly 60% of revenues of the Federal Electricity Commission (CFE). The constitutional changes approved last year broke the monopoly of the supply of electricity in the country to allow private investment in the sector. So far, the companies dominate. Although the number of clients, residential consumers account for only 0.8% of the 37.35 million users connected to CFE. In income means 59.5% of sales, with 171.971 million pesos to November 2013. In contrast, domestic consumers accounting for 88.5% of users just provide 19.1% of sales to CFE, with 55.105 million pesos according to the Energy Regulatory Commission (CRE) in its month's reported electricity industrial statistics published in January. In Mexico, there are important participants in the electricity generation sector as Iberdrola, Sempra, or Alstom, plus corporate and Grupo México. Walmart and Cemex already have significant investments in their own power generation. There are changes in secondary legislation to know the way how the private sector can market their own electricity. CFE sells 100% of electricity in Mexico, but over recent years there have been reforms in the regulatory laws that have allowed the private sector the electricity generation, which now produces nearly 30% of its energy, but you cannot market it directly. For the private sector to have a benefit from the reform, it must have a sufficient supply of natural gas for electricity generation, because the lack of this input has resulted in electricity tariffs up to 84% more expensive for domestic industry against the US, with which it competes directly. Industrial and commercial users of electricity large enough to enter into bilateral contracts with independent power producers can expect to see their costs reduced as a result of energy reform electricity consumption, assuming the new generators can be provided to low-cost natural gas, US, or incremental gas production in Mexico. The constitutional changes also open to private investment the production and distribution of natural gas, a point that can generate a lot of interest to companies, because Mexico has prospective reserves of shale gas of nearly 60,000 million barrels of oil equivalent according to the rating. Mexico has the potential to become one of the biggest producers of ecologic energy, taking advantage of its geographic and environmental situation. but it needs help of private companies because as of now, the government doesn't have the technology and the budget to create high technology infrastructures for this kind of energy. If Mexico privatizes the energy, it would be better for the economy because it would be a lot more competitive and there wouldn't be a monopoly in the energy sector like today. Also, it would bring jobs and more infrastructures to a country that can afford that in this moment. In Mexico, we normally complain about the government. We complain that they don't say anything. But the truth is that the information is there, and many times we just ignore it because of the lack of enthusiasm that is involved in learning new things. If we want to change, we first have to change our culture of information. We have to start by doing research and therefore create our own point of view of the things that take place in Mexico.
I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need.
As a finance and economic consultant, we need to enter into the depths of what are the costs of energy as of now and around how much costs will Mexico incur if deciding to transition into renewable energy resources. As of 2009, the cost of generating energy were 1,193,296 million Mexican pesos a year, compromised directly by the CFE and IPE's independent energy producers. This said, IPEs and CFE have incurred costs of 58.1% and 41.9% respectively. This said, and by doing the math, CFE spends 49,999,102.4 million Mexican pesos a year. This huge amount of money is both very expensive and also harming the environment because of the non-renewable resources used. Having said this, we're going to analyze the transition costs that Mexico will encounter if the transition from non-renewable to renewable resources is created. In some projections made by the Mexican government, by 2028, the installed capacity to generate electricity from renewable resources will increase favorably by 19,761 MW. Thus, wind and hydraulic sources will have the largest share. Although there is a lot of foreign investment in this project, some manufacturers of the windmills and photovoltaics solar modules are located in Mexico, which will directly impact Mexican economy. Even though incurred costs from the transition will be gained, a lot of IPE investment will be made. Also, by buying from the Mexican manufacturers, the Mexican economy will boost.